Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with the ultimate cocaine hippo, a project that they did just because they could, not because they should. It is this abortion, the second Brahms cycle, featuring John Eliot Gardiner, this time with the Royal Concertgebouw Orchestra, on Deutsche Grammophon, of all things. What is Deutsche Grammophon now? I mean, that's an interesting question. It seems like a vehicle for individual projects. But, Gardiner has his own label. And he did the Brahms Symphonies 18 years ago on that label. 18 years ago, yes, but it wasn't really that long ago because they came out in sequence. And a couple of them were okay. A couple of them really sucked. I reviewed the whole thing on ClassicsToday.com. You can go there and read the reviews. At least I reviewed 3 of them. Victor Carr reviewed number 2. And, a couple of the performances weren't terrible, and a couple of them were. Well, these are the same performances. Almost identical, in fact, and except they're worse. They're all worse. I mean, Gardiner is older, more infirm, perhaps. We see this. 18 years ago, he was zippier. He was working with an ensemble that knew him, that knew what he wanted, that put up with him, that was fresh from getting slapped around or whatever he did to these people, and they played quite well. Now, the Concertgebouw is an amazing orchestra, and they could play this stuff in their sleep. But remember, he's telling them to do it his way, which is not traditional necessarily, and they sound uncomfortable. But we'll get to that in a minute. We'll get to the details shortly. But first we have the new Deutsche Grammophon paradigm for recording seems to be that they're almost entirely artist-focused. To their credit, Brahms gets top billing. Yay! Gardiner's down here, but there he is. And we have the Gardiner photo spread looking very, very Gardiner-like. Wait a minute, he's out actually looking Gardnerish. There he is. There he is on the park bench that he calls home. It looks very, like an old man on a park bench. Okay. And in the meantime, you get a little booklet, and the little booklet tells us that these are live recordings. They were recorded in concert in, 2022 and 2023 for number 4. And look at this. This is absolutely fascinating. The assistant engineers, there's a whole bunch of those. We have recording producer and engineer, editing and marketing. It's all one person. It's this Everett Parker guy. And the assistant engineers were, Lauren Urius, and oh my goodness, the famous Taco Vandervert, and his 2 assistants, Burrito and Fajita, no doubt. So there they all are, okay? Here it is in this little booklet. And in the booklet we have a missive from the great man himself. He writes, are we ready? The Brahms project with our Orchestra Révolutionnaire et Romantique in 2007 was a thrilling undertaking, for him maybe, not so much the rest of us. A thorough reappraisal of Brahms's sound world. Oh, God, the bullshit, it's starting to stink, even as I read this. Both in terms of period instruments and a study of the surviving evidence of performance practice. Oh, please. And my pet hobby horse, the close link between the symphonies and Brahms's choral works, how the symphonies spring to life through the experience of composing and conducting choral works, his own and many earlier examples, which he transcribed and conducted. Well, that wasn't audible in any particular way. He did couple the symphonies with some vocal works. That's been done, like Claudio Abbado and the Berlin Philharmonic, for example, for this very label. Okay, so why then a second recording 18 years later? First, because these symphonies are evergreen. Not when they're played like this, they're not. It's a dead evergreen, sorry. Miracles at the time of their inception, and super challenging every time one encounters them. Second, because I sensed, here we go, the narcissistic hog wallow that is to come. I sensed a need and a personal challenge to build on that seminal early experience. Seminal for who? I mean, we've had period instrument performances of the Brahms Symphonies, or period style performances by Norrington and Hardencourt and Manzi and etc., and so forth. So what's special about him? Nothing. Anyway, that seminal experience, and to extend its findings and interpretations in working with a modern instrument orchestra, especially such a distinguished, flexible, and immensely accomplished one as the Royal Concertgebouw Orchestra, in search of a fresh synthesis of styles and approaches. Fuego y cristal, fire and ice, basically, as Jorge Luis Borges described them. That's what we've been aiming at. That's exactly what we don't have. No fire, no ice. Well, there's some ice. There's plenty of ice, but crystal, or whatever you want to call it. But, you know, the hubris. How is this a synthesis of performing styles and approaches? And what is Brahms? I mean, the thing that is most annoying about this whole conception is that Gardiner treats Brahms as though, well, he's like one of those people who changes their hair color from like green to purple. You know, it's like, oh, it's Wednesday, let's do it this way. It's Friday, let's do purple, let's do it that way. Brahms is just the subject of a series of applique, a series of outside performance standards that you simply stick on him. He's not Brahms. Brahms, who has a tradition going back 100 and some odd years of steady, consistent performance among the world's great orchestras. This jerk thinks that he actually has some sort of super secret knowledge of what the true way to play Brahms is, and he does exactly the same thing twice and then claims it's different, that it's a synthesis. Well, the only thing that's getting synthesized is, instead of having the Orchestra Révolutionnaire et Romantique doing Brahms, period instrument-wise, he's got a regular orchestra, but he's telling them to do the same stuff, and he's conducting it in the same way, only not as well, largely, because these were just one-off live performances, and maybe these things are edited together from a couple of them, but you're stuck with what happened on the day. There's no definitive something that he's telling us or projecting through these performances. The very idea is absurd. And what really is annoying about these performances is that he, of course, insists on the minimal vibrato approach for the strings, which sounds horrible. It sounded horrible with the Orchestra Révolutionnaire et Romantique, but they were well rehearsed. They were drilled. And there was a compensating degree of power, for example, from trumpets and drums, and accent and handling of rhythm and things like that compensated for the anemic sound of the strings. It really did in the first symphony anyway, and to a certain degree in the second, I think. Not in the third and fourth. It was just awful all around. And so he could get away with it once. I mean, those performances haven't worn well from 18 years ago, and maybe he felt the same, because why else redo it? What new is he telling us? Nonsense. Well, let me just talk a bit about the vibrato thing, which, as you know, I am completely obsessed with, because it's total BS what they're feeding us, that there was less vibrato in the orchestras then. It's just not true. And the evidence is there that it's not true. It's totally provable that it's not true. And what's really interesting is that it's totally provable with this specific orchestra. And I'll tell you how. I'll tell you how we can prove it. It's really fascinating. First of all, we have a little essay by moi. There it is, which appeared in Music and Letters. So klingt Wien, conductors, orchestras, and vibrato in the 19th and early 20th centuries. This is where I amass some of the evidence that I uncovered as to the truth of the matter and the crap that these people are feeding us about what this music might have sounded like in Brahms's day. So, you ready? First of all, Exhibit A, we have right here Bruno Walter. Bruno Walter in 1960 talking about the sound of the Vienna Philharmonic. Now, the Vienna Philharmonic, as you know, is the iconic Brahms orchestra because Brahms lived in Vienna and they played his music rather regularly. So there's that, right? So he says, I saw Vienna for the first time in 1897. I had an engagement then in the small municipal theater in Bratislava. I came from Breslau, went to Bratislava because I wanted to be in charge. They were the most paltry terms, he wrote, but I felt that there, what I said would be as first conductor. Bratislava was 1.5 hours from Vienna at that time. I went by boat down the Danube to Bratislava, but when I was in Vienna, I finally heard the Philharmonic for the first time. For me, this was a life-altering impression because it was this sound of the orchestra that I have experienced ever since. I have the feeling this is the way an orchestra should sound, the way it should play. I had never heard the beauty, this calmness of the sound, that sort of glissando, the manner of vibrato, the string sound, the blend of woodwinds with the strings, with the brass, the balance of the brass in combination with the percussion contributing together to the overall sonority of the orchestra. For me, this impression was definitive. And now I would like to anticipate a point and tell you this. This sound, 1897, is the same today. He's talking in 1960, in case you're wondering. There is not a single man left from that time, as you can imagine. In the early 50s, after that terrible period, I was in America, and I met up with the Vienna Philharmonic in Edinburgh to take part in the festival. And it was a touching reunion to play with them after such a long separation. And when they began to play, it was the same sound. And even now, when I made music with them and began rehearsing Schubert, it was the same sound that had given me such delight in 1897. What this is can only be called tradition. Here is a vibrant city expressing in musicality through the people assembled there in the orchestra. The musical culture has been expressed in Vienna, especially in a very specific local form. This is the sound of Vienna with vibrato. Yeah, in 1960, that orchestra sounded the same as it did in 1897. Brahms died in 1897. So we know, and the orchestra's 1897 sound was not markedly different from it was in 1890 or 1887. So that's one piece of testimonial evidence. But there's more, and we can talk about the Concertgebouw. Why? Because there's a video. There's a video of Wilhelm Mengelberg in 1931. It was made in Paris while the orchestra was on tour, conducting the Adagietto, all strings, from Bizet's L'Arlésienne Suite No. 1, which is a work which is absolutely contemporary to the Brahms Symphonies. And Mengelberg himself, who was born in 1870-something, was contemporary with the Brahms Symphonies. And the Concertgebouw was founded in 1888. And so we have this performance for strings where we can see on video. It pans through the orchestra. Go watch it. It's on YouTube. You can see the string players using exactly the same kind of vibrato that a modern orchestra would. They start with the cellos with their left hands going, hey, like this. You just follow along. Well, you might say in 1931, everyone was using vibrato. They weren't doing it in the 1890s. Wrong. And I can tell you how I know it's wrong. It's wrong because I wrote for this paper to the Concertgebouw, and I asked them who was in the orchestra then and how long had they been in the orchestra and how old were they in 1931. And the management of the orchestra very, very kindly sent me a list of everybody who is in that video, aside from Mengelberg himself, who would have told them to use vibrato or not. But there were 61 players, or 61 string players in the Concertgebouw in 1931. 7 of them had been there from between 31 to 43 years. In other words, going back to before the turn of the century, the 1900s. 10 of them were there from 25 to 30 years, so around the turn of the century period. 31 were there from 10 to 24 years, and 13 were there less than 10 years. So this is a string orchestra composed of long-termers, some of whom were quite elderly. And if you look at the video, which gives absolute evidence, there is no relationship between the observed age of the player and the amount of vibrato that they use. Everybody does the same thing, basically, and they're all vibrating away, and some a little more and some a little less, which is what happens in an orchestral string section, because each player has their own technique and their own specific sound, and it all blends together. And what you get is the general vibrato of the symphony orchestra. So there's no question that the Concertgebouw was using vibrato, oh gosh, way back, from the time of its founding, let's say. And he's telling them not to, as often as not, or to use substantially less. And the result doesn't sound very well. The blend is off. The sonority is off. And that's not a synthesis. It's not a synthesis of anything, of old and new. It's just this crank telling them what to do, and it's wrong. And I'll bet a lot of them know it's wrong and are not happy with the fact that they're being made to play this music in a way that's wrong. It's absolutely absurd. So, I mean, there's lots more evidence for this, so that we can go through it. But anyway, this paper, by the way, is posted on classicstoday.com if you're curious, under books and articles by classicstoday.com writers. You can find a link and read it yourself online. So that's the bottom line for this interpretation, such as it is. And now let's talk about the individual symphonies. Symphony number 1. The introduction is a slop fest tempo-wise. I mean, it's slow, it's fast. The thing about Gardiner is that he claims to be using as his model, or he did in his previous Brahms cycle, which is the same, here, it's the same here, that typescript that we have by David Bloom, which supposedly gives us Fritz Steinbach, the Meiningen conductor's version of how Brahms should be played, because Brahms tried out many of his symphonies with the Meiningen Court Orchestra, and they also had a big tradition of Brahms, and they were a little chamber orchestra, smallish orchestra. They played standing up and all that stuff, and that it's a very interesting thing. Mackerras uses it for his Brahms cycle in the period style with the Scottish Chamber Orchestra, which has plenty of vibrato. Golly gee. Why? Because that typescript only says don't use vibrato in 2 tiny spots. Just 2, by the way. Very, very interesting. And one of them is in the 3rd Symphony, in the slow movement, and that wonderful moment where you have the theme that comes back at the finale, that that business, where he says to the strings in their repeated notes, no vibrato. It's very quiet, no vibrato, icy tone. So it's interesting both for the fact that he says that you don't use vibrato. It's also interesting because he tells you what the expressive result is: iciness. So why do you want to use iciness when the cellos have the second theme of the first movement of the Second Symphony, or the warm tune at the beginning of any of the slow movements? Why would you say don't use vibrato then? Is Brahms's string tone always icy? Well, I guess so, or often is not. Let's put it that way. So anyway, the First Symphony begins with this swishy introduction where the tempos come and go and stop and start, and Gardiner isn't good at that. He's not. He's a Baroque guy. He's a classicist. He also has a certain temperament, a certain rigidity, a strictness to the way he handles these things, which make sometimes his performances of Baroque and classical music absolutely exciting, thrilling even. It can work in that music. It doesn't work in this one, and he doesn't sound comfortable. It's not convincing. The speeds lurch about, without connection between them. There's no naturalness and organic cohesion of the long musical line. So that's the introduction. Now the first movement gets going, and it's just not as good as it was the last time he did it, because he seems not to be willing to let the orchestra go at the climaxes. The timpani are rather mushily recorded. The moment of recapitulation, for example, the first movement, which is just tremendous climax, it was powerful with the Orchestra Révolutionnaire et Romantique, because the trumpets and drums really cut through, and he let them play. And he doesn't let them play here. They sound cautious. And that just takes the juice out of the whole thing. Now, the slow movement, of course, suffers from the lack of vibrato, and it's very, very quick. The same thing with that. The third movement, it's just too fast. My goodness, it's so insensitively quick. It needs to breathe. The phrases need to sing, and he doesn't let them do it. It's just this do 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 da 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 da. No, that's not Brahms. It isn't. It's mechanical and rigid and unpleasant. The finale isn't terrible. The finale goes a little bit better, but boy, there's no mystery at all in the introduction. The Alphorn theme has these weird crescendos at the end of every phrase. Maybe he thinks that it sounds more Alphorny that way. Ya da dum wam, ya da da. I don't know why he does that. It's annoying. And as far as the body of that movement, well, he takes it pretty quickly. And it's all right, although it doesn't have lift in the tutis. None of these performances do. They sound heavy. They sound bogged down. And it's not because he's using a large, normal orchestra. It's because his conducting is soggy. It's just not very good. Now, Second Symphony. Oh, this is where he weaponizes the exposition repeat. The exposition in the first movement is just, it's not a slow performance. It's 19 minutes. I mean, some of the others go 20 some odd. It could be much slower than that. It just has no contrast. It has no contrast because the violins and the strings have no color and variety of timbre or articulation. The tempo here has very little flexibility. Those soft rolls on the timpani with the trombones muttering in the back. There's no feeling of menace. And so you hear this whole it's a long exposition. And then it starts again. And you want to just rend your garments and run screaming out into the streets. The slow movement again with those thin sounding cellos. This you would think he would know this. I mean, he's British. This is like the origin of that Elgarian noblemente, the cello cantilena, the beginning of the slow movement. And it's so dry and mealy. It's the third movement, again, like the third movement of the first symphony, has insufficient contrast between its two tempo areas because he just rushes the whole thing. And then there's the finale. The finale is oddly leaden. This was a problem in his last version of it, his last performance as well. I mean, the coda has no lift. He doesn't pick it up. It has clarity, but it seems to get heavier and more metronomic. There's no sense of breaking through, of joy, of that giddy, exaltation that the music projects in the hands of people like Walter and Joachim and Levine and Abato and Dochnani and Klemperer and where does the list end? So that's that. Now the third symphony. Well, he doesn't screw it up tempo-wise particularly, but he does in other ways. The balances are off in this performance. I don't know what happened sonically, but the woodwinds seem further back in the mix for some reason in this particular performance. The first movement, if you've ever looked at the first movement, the entire first subject has a syncopated rhythm in the strings. It's a cha-cha-cha-cha-cha-cha-cha, that sort of thing behind it. And you almost never hear it. You never hear much of it. Sometimes it peeks through. You kind of wonder what it sounds like or if you'll ever hear it. Well, here you do. And you realize why in those other performances you don't. Because it doesn't help. He has such a hard time, it seems, balancing this music correctly. so that the melody's on top, the accompaniment on the bottom. When you get to the second subject, he is the enemy of lyricism. The clarinets come in with that beautiful tune, da da da, ya da 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 dum, ba da da, ya da. Well, on that second phrase, when they repeat the opening, he does the super duper Osmo Venska style pianissimo, which immediately sucks the life out of the tune. Oh, it's horrible, just horrible. And so again, you're missing things like climaxes with the mushy timpani and that's the first movement. Now the slow movement, well, it has a passage that's supposed to be icy, and they do that very well. Actually, the tempo isn't bad there, nor is it bad in the third movement, although the cellos could, of course, sing with a little bit of more full-throated voice. The finale, very, very, very quick. I mean, it was a hapless scramble in his earlier performance. It's a little bit less of a hapless scramble here, but it's still missing the weight. It's missing the emotion behind the music, the anger, the viciousness. Chum, cha-chum, 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 da-da-da-da. You don't hear that contrabassoon in the chorale, the soft chorale before the first big outburst, the gigantic central climax. I mean, it should be the heavens cutting open when the brass section comes in with da-da-da-da-da-da-dum-bum-ba. Well, the problem there is that the trumpets dominate, but you've got to hear the horns and the trombones and those people too. And they're somehow, he doesn't balance his climaxes. He really doesn't. And the result is ineffective. The fourth may be the worst of all. The first movement is just trudgy. My God, it's trudgy and it's metronomic. It can sound that way because it's based on two-note little bitlets, right? Ya-dum, da-dum, da-da, da-da. But you've got to put those things together and make a tune out of it. He gives the most rigid performance of this first movement. It's absolutely metronomic, mechanical. Maybe he plays with tempos a little bit. I don't know. It's just you can't tell. I mean, you just listen to it, and there's nothing happening here. There's no passion. The heroic last theme, da 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 da. I mean, there's got to be something, and there's nothing. The coda is as flat as a pancake. I mean, yeah, just dreadful. The second movement, the opening theme, is phrased with this weird legato. That last two notes, da, 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 they got to be punched out a little bit. I mean, why am I telling this man how to conduct? Do I know more than he does? Theoretically not. But one thing I do know what all the better performances do. I mean, it's not that I have some innate feeling for Brahms, but having listened to 10 billion performances, you know what works and what doesn't. So the slow movement, which is rather swift because he takes all these things rather quick and of course somewhat anemic sounding, you would think he'd at least give it a little bit of character through accent, and he doesn't. The scherzo, the third movement, is too fast, like all of the scherzo in these performances. It could have been exciting, if he'd allowed, the brass to cut loose a little bit more, backed by the timpani. But the fact of the matter is, speed is not the issue. The issue is in that movement particularly, is accent and emphasis, because it's got to have real power, sort of raw, primal power. And it doesn't here. It's light and it's fluffy and it's zippy. The triangle is very well captured. He does that stupid Luftpause. This is one of his survivals of authentic performance practice, I think. Da 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 bomb bomb like that. And the question, if you do that, is what do you do when it comes back? Do you do it every time? Do you do it not? Well, he's not quite sure. He does it sometimes a little bit and sometimes not. But I had the wrong tempo there because he's more da 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 da, which actually exaggerates the effect of that strange little pause thing because he's playing it very, very quickly and it stops the music more than it stops the music when you take it at a more reasonable tempo. So what could be a genial inflection becomes an annoying mannerist object. Get it? And then there's the final Passacaglia. Well, this he treats with great fluidity of tempo. It stops dead by the time you get to the central flute solo and the variations immediately ensuing. And then it lurches back to life for the recapitulation. And it's a very, I find, just unconvincing patchwork view of a movement that has this, it has to have the cumulative inexorability of fate itself, because of course it's a Passacaglia, and it has, even though you have to be flexible with the tempo, you should be. You can't be totally rigid with this 8-note thing repeating over and over again. And he's not. That's to his credit. But again, it's a question of how convincing you are in your lack of Passacaglia-like rigidity. He's not. The tension sags. The very, very ending. He whips it up to a nice lather that's very good, hangs on to the last chord twice as long as you're supposed to. I suppose that's another survival of authentic performance practice, although many other people manage to do it more convincingly. And so that's it. A completely unnecessary, wholly hubristic, chutzpahdik, the word actually we use, good old Yiddish, cranky old man's view of Brahms. Frankly, I mean, that's what I get from this, especially having refreshed myself with his prior Brahms cycle before listening to this one. It's not that it's necessarily better, because neither of them were terribly good, but what was good in the previous cycle has much less merit here. Which means that this is the ultimate cocaine hippo, the cycle that had no reason to exist. No one is lining up waiting for this guy to play Brahms. Nobody. And nobody cares whether he thinks he's offering a fruitful new synthesis of his earlier and later performances. I mean, it's all about him. I mean, he's the only one who hears the synthesis, I guarantee it. And who cares? Even more significantly, what's the point? Deutsche Grammophon, grow a brain. Somebody at DG has to decide whether projects are worth putting out or not. I mean, this is obviously paid for, like his Bach cantata pilgrimage thing was. So they're just issuing it as a vehicle, and he's famous and they're famous, so you get famosity. But what you don't get is great Brahms. So there you go, my friends. Keep on listening. Take care.